So many new things we get to figure out. Isn't it good? Life is good. Thank you for being here. Happy New Year. I trust that it's started off well. I always find that this is the most interesting time of the year because for about 2 weeks around mid-December, then everything becomes what's going to happen after the first of the year. And maybe I'm the only one that does that. I don't know. But, everything's going to start in the new year, and then the new year comes, and okay, day 3. We're into it. It's going great. But the real question is, what does day 5 look like, and what does day 10 look like? Because it's very easy, you may have noticed, very easy to set intention, but to follow through with that intention always requires something more of us. So we're beginning a new year. As I said, we've got a new band. I'm just so delighted these guys have agreed to join us. These guys are professional musicians, which means that they work late nights. So there's nothing quite as exciting as say, hey, you could be here at 8:30 in the morning on a Sunday morning. All right. But the blessing, as I have told them, and you're going to support me on this, is that you get a really wonderful audience that will pay attention to you and not trying to pick up the person next to you. Well, I can't promise that. Not trying to order a drink. That I can promise you. Not trying to order a drink or all the other things that go on. So we're just delighted they're here. We're following a new series this year, along with about 120 or 130 other C.S.L. centers around the globe, following a laid-out program. So that means I get to learn how to follow directions. We'll see how long that works. We're already at day 1, and I'm about to get to the topic, which is, oh no, I know what it is. No, it's exciting. So a lot of newness, and with a lot of newness always comes a lot of discomfort. Have you noticed that? That when we say, I am committed to being different somehow, then we begin to automatically step outside of our known reality into the unknown, and that's why we don't like to make change. We want the effect of change, we want the benefit of change, but we don't always want to do the inner and outer work that goes along with change. That's why pills are so wonderful, right? That's why we have this wonderful industry that says, we got a pill for that. You don't really have to do anything, just swallow this and life's good, right? But for those of us that have been around for a while, we know that consciousness takes form, and therefore we work first in consciousness to create the reality we want to experience. We're looking today at this idea around a global vision of a world that works for everyone. A number of years ago, as we were experiencing, as Centers for Spiritual Living was experiencing a midlife crisis, let's call it, organizationally. Not even, actually, it was more like an end-of-life crisis. Because what we realized as we looked at ourselves and our organization and what was happening was that if we continued on the same path, then within a very short amount of time, we would probably be dead. So the opportunity, organizationally, not everybody, I'm not a cop. What is that word? Apocalypse, yes. Not that kind of dead, but just like, right? Because people and organizations must evolve and change with the times they're in, or they die, right? And so we looked at that, and it began a process which was really deep and rich and uncomfortable. And it was because most deep, rich work is uncomfortable. I just want to keep emphasizing this point as you move through your discomfort. And we began a process to really re-examine what are our values and who are we and what do we stand for in the world and what matters. And interestingly, in that process, as we began to study that value survey, we realized that organizationally we didn't have a lot of shared values. So what happens when you don't have a lot of shared values is you get a lot of opinions of what should be important, what should be the most important, what needs to happen first. So as we did that work, we began a deepening process, and out of that evolved the global vision, the global heart vision. Because one of the things we wanted to look at was moving out of the mind into the heart. Now, ours is a philosophy called science of mind. And I often say I know a lot of metaphysicians who are metaphysicians from the neck up. They understand how spiritual principle works. They can quote to you Ernest Holmes. They can quote to you Thomas Troward. They can quote to you even biblical passages if it supports their point of view. They can support all of these things, but when you look at their lives, they don't necessarily reflect what they're saying. I'm not looking at anybody particular. I'm just looking around for effect. But I do like to see who gets nervous when I start looking around like that. Like, surely he doesn't mean me. Right? Because don't we all do that to some degree or another? We all say, this is what I believe, and yet sometimes this is how I act. And they're not always in integrity. So it's okay. It just means you're human. It just means you're growing and evolving, as am I. But as we look at this idea of moving that philosophy out of an intellectual capacity and moving it into a deeper understanding, into the heart, then life really changes for us. You see, we can walk around with a great intellectual, theoretical understanding, but when it becomes real, when it's what lives in our heart, that's where real transformation occurs. So that journey is always starting at the mind. What is it that I believe? What is it that I hold to be true? Because what I find is most of us are spending most of our time proving ourselves right. I have a theory about life. Now let me prove that theory right. Now, it does not matter what the theory is. Hear me on this. All people are out to get you. Now, how can I prove that right? Because if there's anybody on the planet that's out to get me, I will find them. It's amazing how this universe works, isn't it? It's just fabulous. Likewise, when we move into that understanding that everyone and everything in my life is here to support me in my fullness, we begin to attract those experiences. It has to do with us. So when we begin to look at the global vision, we're starting to look at that in this universe is abundant. It is absolutely abundant. There is no lack of anything that this universal intelligence knows how to create. Can we agree on that? Can I get an amen? Okay, we're starting that too this year. That's a new thing. Communion, altar calls, all of it. We're just going there. You know what the heck. Right? So if that's so, then we want to look at the fact that if the universe is abundant, that the problems that we're experiencing as humanity are not for a lack of abundance. That does not mean we don't have poverty in our world. It does not mean that there aren't terrible things taking place around the planet, but it's not for a fundamental lack of abundance. It has to do with systems. And systems come, guess what, out of our thinking. How do we treat one another? How do we affect one another? So for me, what I have discovered is that there is enough. Scarcity is not the problem, but rather the problem tends to be limited consciousness. So our work, first and foremost, is always at the realm of consciousness. Now, some of you may have grown up as I did that believe that if you can change your circumstances, you can change your life. Right? That once you get more money, then things are really going to start happening for you. Once you find that right mate, wow, happily ever after, as everyone who's married in the room can attest. Some of you think once you get rid of the mate you have, life will really get rolling for you, right? Then it's going to happen. Once we have kids, great. Or once we get rid of kids. It's always this thing that once all the circumstances around me change, then life's going to happen. But I would suggest to you that this is life. This is it. It doesn't get any better than this. Unless we change within ourselves first. So that's the work. So I find that if I'm trying to change things at an outer level, I spend a lot of time and effort and energy in trying to make the world be different around me. when I find that in doing the inner work, so that I'm no longer seeing lack and limitation, but realizing at a heartfelt level that I live in an abundant universe that is supporting me in my fullness, then my approach to reality is different. I'm not saying we don't have to do anything. You see, that's another great metaphysical myth, that once you just get the consciousness right, then it's all done. Poof. It's all done. And that's great. There's a few really highly evolved souls that is true for. But for the rest of us, we may have to then move into action around the new consciousness. But until we have the new consciousness, we have a faulty roadmap. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you've tried to do the same thing over and over. And you've expected that somehow you're going to get a different result because you're going to try harder this time. When sometimes what we need to do is make a fundamental shift in our approach to reality. A great teacher once told me that when you go into spiritual intention, when you go into affirmative prayer, if you will, then one of two things is going to happen for you. One, circumstances will change, or two, your perception will change. Either way is a profound healing, isn't it? I often share the stories of a woman who was so not happy with her job. And the people that she worked with were just awful. And she had a whole list of why they were awful. And I think she documented it carefully just to make sure she didn't forget any of the salient points of how their awfulness was. And so she came wanting prayer, wanting to have a shift in experience. And so we worked on that, and we began to look at a different approach to it, to begin to see what can be appreciated right where she is. Because you see, when we don't appreciate where we are, and we think that some other circumstance will be better, then we leave the circumstance that we're in, we go into the new circumstance, and lo and behold, if all the same people don't come with us. Different faces, same story. Have you noticed that? When we don't complete with something and we move into something new, we just kind of bring it with us. We're going, wow, how did all these people find me again? So in this situation, she began to appreciate where she was. She began to have a shift in perception, not seeing what's wrong, not seeing who's to blame, not all of that stuff, but what was good, what was true, what was right. A few weeks later, she came back and she said to me, "You would not believe how everybody in my office has changed." Good for them. They finally got it, right? Ernest Holmes said to us that we believe that the ultimate goal of life is the complete emancipation from all discord of every nature, and that it is sure to be attained by all. The goal of life is to completely emancipate ourselves from discord of every nature, and that goal is sure to be attained by all. Now, what Ernest didn't tell us is how many lifetimes that's going to take, right? Because I'm thinking as I enter the last third of my life, when do we get that? No, but you see, that's the goal, isn't it? We're going to talk in a few weeks about this idea that we've learned all we need to learn through suffering. You see, sometimes we think that suffering is that we need to suffer in order to grow, and I think it's an option, but I don't think it's the only way. And so if we're trying to learn, then we're no longer seeing that we're going to arrive at a point, but rather we begin to understand that we're all in a process of growth and unfoldment. Now, I don't know what is holding you captive. For some, it's health. For others, it's wealth. For others, it's relationships. I always say we always pick one, work on that for a while. And you think, I'm at the effect of my money, or I'm at the effect of other people, or I'm at the effect of my body. When we begin to understand that there's nothing wrong with us. We're all on a journey. We're all exploring. But our goal is to find freedom, to find spiritual freedom and emancipation, to live our life fully. It does not mean necessarily that things have to be different. I often speak of my hero nephew who went from being this wild extreme skier dude to being a quadriplegic. And he's the most empowered, insightful person I've ever met. You see, he didn't let his circumstances define his beingness. Rather, his circumstances actually in some ways allowed him to tap into a greater capacity. Now, I'm not saying each one of us needs that journey, but you see, we get stuck in the things of the world, that the world has to be different. And I just keep coming back to the idea that really all that has to be different is me and my understanding of the nature reality. Seeing the beauty, seeing the truth, seeing the love. Dr. Holmes said to us that we are in this great spiritual impulsion, that there is a movement taking place in consciousness. And he says to us, it is not bound by dogma or fear or superstition or materialism. He says the universe in which we live is a spiritual system now. And as we understand that, then we allow new possibility to emerge. I'm fascinated. You've heard me talk so many times because I think religion is a really wonderful thing until it's not. And what do I mean by that? I think religion, which actually, if you dissect the word, it really means to bind back. So when you have a religious tradition, what it's saying is it's binding you back to your source. And so when you look at different religious traditions, they each bring a beauty and a splendor and a wonder to the spiritual life. But they also can sometimes bring limitation. And they can bring a misunderstanding of the true essence of the teaching. Now, I'm not going to call any of them out. That's not my goal. I'm just saying that sometimes when the religion gets in the way of the spiritual experience, then something has gone awry. And so you see that. So Holmes was putting forth a spiritual philosophy that said we aren't going to be bound by dogma. We're not going to be bound by ritual. We're not going to be bound by all that. You don't have to do 18 Hail Marys and a high five or whatever. I don't know. I wasn't Catholic, so I'm not sure exactly what they do. But, you know, is that one of the practices? I have a feeling it's not. Right? You don't have to wear a certain garb. You don't have to not wear a certain garb. You see, it's not in that. That's where I think people get astray, is it's beautiful to have those spiritual practices, those things that bind us back to the divine. But it is sometimes in that activity of spirit rather than the spiritual experience that we get off track. So Holmes is saying to us, what if we were to put forth an idea that helped people of whatever spiritual persuasion, of whatever religious tradition, could come and understand the spiritual nature of the universe in which we live and then practice their faith with this new understanding. Now, I've got to tell you, I see a lot of what I've been teaching for a long time showing up in a lot of places. I see Joel Osteen is teaching a lot of what we teach. Only he's teaching it to 50,000 people, so, you know, hats off to you, brother, right? And we see a lot of this, and this is good news for me. This is good news because as we are evolving into a world that works for everyone, we need to honor everyone's spiritual path. First and foremost, we must recognize that each and every person is an emanation of the divine living spirit. We must recognize that each and every person is sacred and treat life accordingly, treat people accordingly. So Holmes said to us that, he said that the transformation takes place here. You don't have to wonder if it will take place out there. The world will come when enough of us see through the night into the celestial light that shineth more and more unto the perfect day. Ernest could get a little glorious sometimes, right? But he's saying the transformation doesn't take place out there. It takes place within us. It takes place within each of us. At the end of this service, we're going to sing, "Let there be peace on earth." Let it begin with me. And I would say that's a really good rule of thumb. For whatever we're seeing that is discordant in the world, then we'd say, let there be peace. Let there be love. Let there be joy. Let there be abundance. And let it begin with me. Our work is never done. Sorry. I don't care if you signed up for a 40-day program or whatever. It's not done, right? That's kind of the illusion. The spiritual practice is spiritual practice, and it's ongoing. All of it is ongoing, because what I find and what my invitation for each of us is that we continue on this path, deepening in the awareness of who we are, deepening in our awareness of spirit as the only reality, choosing to see love, choosing to forgive, choosing to set ourselves free of the limitations of the past, to embrace a bright and beautiful future. We are transformative agents. It's easy sometimes in the world in which we experience to think, well, what can I do? And all I can say to you is do what is yours to do. Do what is in front of you to do. I love Marianne Williamson once said, she said, everybody has a ministry. And if everybody, she said, all you have to do, if you have an address book, this was back when we had address books, if you have an address book, you have a ministry. You have people in your life that you are charged with loving and empowering and nurturing. And so we start there. Now, if you have a great and grand calling to do something bigger than that, great. I celebrate you. But start where you are. Love the ones in front of you. Choose peace, choose joy, choose love. So we're holding that intention as we move into our greater experience of life, that we are creating a world that works for everyone. A world that honors and acknowledges all people everywhere for their uniqueness, their beauty, and their sameness, because we are all one in the divine. So I want to invite you, if you will, to begin with me as we move into prayer. Taking a deep breath, breathing into the moment, allowing our heart to be open and our minds to be expansive. To recognize and know in this very moment, there is but one life. There is but one power. There is but one infinite being. And as we ground and center ourselves in that awareness, we simply are willing in this moment to choose anew, to re-examine that which we have held to be sacred, to be willing in this moment to breathe into life fully and allow life to breathe fully into us, to see with new eyes of possibility, to allow our hearts to be open to absolute unconditional love, to allow our minds to be receptive to divine wisdom. As we move into this sacred moment, we're simply recognizing that the one life, expressing in and through and as all, delights in its self-expression. For it is always saying yes to us. And so let us say yes to that more expanded life. Let us move into the awareness of that divine wholeness that is always present, always available. We know that that wholeness expresses itself as health, as well-being, as vitality. We step into the awareness of the ever-present reality of divine love, absolute and unconditional. This is the only true reality. So we allow our hearts to be lifted up. We fully forgive. We release that which no longer serves us. We choose love over every other option as we move through our daily experience, and we allow our lives to be healed and transformed through the power of this unconditional love. We speak the word of truth as we recognize our wholeness and our inherent abundance. For we are that one with that which is creative, that which is the source and the substance of all that is. We allow our lives to be reflections of this divine intelligence, of this infinite wisdom, of this holy substance. We claim our true identity, and we move confidently through the world as we recognize the truth of who we are and the power within. So I'm giving thanks for this day, for the many blessings in our lives, those seen and those yet to be realized, for the opportunities that present themselves for our greater spiritual growth and unfoldment. We begin by blessing this spiritual community, this divine idea, unfolding in grace and with ease and joy and abundance. We're giving thanks this day and extending a blessing to all people everywhere. We are indeed holding that vision for a world that works for all, for a planet at peace, a planet where joy is the order of the day. And as always, we take a moment to bless our priests, rabbis, ministers, teachers of every faith and of all faith traditions. For we know there are many pathways to the divine. Therefore, we joyfully celebrate the journey of all people, knowing the destination is the same. Today we choose peace. Today we choose love. Today we choose compassion and understanding. And we allow it to be revealed through us and as us. For all of these blessings and so many more, I'm simply giving thanks. I'm allowing it to be so, as together we say, and so it is.